Hello everypony, a board brony here. Now as some of you may be aware, if you are newer to the channel or happen to occasionally just check my older videos, a few days ago I got a comment on the first chapter of My Roommate's a Vampire from 3mu3, who said that they didn't have the time to read or listen to the entire story, and they wanted to know if someone could put it kind of in a nutshell for them. Which gave me a really interesting idea. I make the stories the way I do because I always liked kind of being able to listen to fan fiction like I would an audiobook. That's why I first got interested in channels like A's Con, Mike the Microphone, and so on. So that's the format I kind of went with. But it occurred to me that some folks might not have that kind of time. Maybe summarizing some of these fan fictions could be helpful. And it sounds like an interesting thing to try to do. And I couldn't have asked for a tougher fan fiction to do it with, because Roommate's a Vampire is one of my favorite fan fictions of all time. And I've read a lot of fan fictions, not just for the channel. I mean, I think I have some around 10 pages of favorites on FemFiction alone. I read a lot of fan fictions. But I can easily say that it is one of my top favorites of all time. So to try to take a story that's not only that long, 22 full chapters, I know you're going to say there are 24, but technically the last two are bonus chapters and aren't part of the actual story, so there's 22 chapters to the story. It's that long, and it's one of my favorites, so it's very hard for me to try to cut out some of the writing and some of the detail to try to shorten it. So I've done the best I can. Admittedly, it's not exactly stripped down. It's not exactly outlines and highlights for everything. I've basically taken each chapter and tried to condense it down into one or two paragraphs of the most important information, or the most interesting information. As I said, it's one of my favorite stories, and it's so well done that it's really hard to cut out a lot of the really good character moments. But I had to. So that being said, anyone who listens to this, if you haven't heard or read the original story and you ever have the time to do so, I highly recommend you do it even after listening to this, because it is fantastic. But that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to divide this up into, I think, 3 parts. I already have the first 8 chapters summarized, and I've gotten them down to 3,400 words, which isn't bad, considering each chapter averages around the mid to high 1,000, even 2,000 page range, sometimes a little more. So I think that's fair. So I'm going to do 8 chapters in this video, 8 in the next, and then the remainder in the last video. And I'm going to try as best I can to pump these out at a pretty quick pace so no one's kept waiting. So we'll go ahead and start at the beginning. Firstly, a little bit of information. I made this logo myself. I know it's terrible. I don't have any proper photo editing software because I don't do a lot of picture editing, and I promised to get this out this weekend, so I don't have a whole lot of time left to work on a logo, or unfortunately really work on the recording. I spent most of the time I had available doing the chapter summarizations. So, it's the best I could do. If any of you out there are really good at drawing and want to make me a custom logo for this segment, that'd be awesome. Because in my infinite creativity, I decided to call it My Little Cliffnotes. Summarization is magic. So, on to the story itself. My Roommate is a Vampire by Dennis the Menace on FemFiction is a vinyl Octavia story written as first person from Octavia's perspective. As such, it is completely appropriate to hear Octavia's voice in your head when you read the narration. Now, in my opinion, Vinyl's quirky personality and in-your-face attitude definitely show here, and the sarcasm and eye-roll humor offered by Octavia, both in her narration and her dialogue, makes him a perfect fit character-wise. This is probably one of the best characterizations of both Octavia and Vinyl that I've come across in the fandom, and I could easily read an entire series of stories based around this version of the characters. Unfortunately, this is the only story featuring these characters that the author has posted so far. As always, a link to the story is going to be in the description. If you ever have the time, I suggest you check it out. So, this is my first attempt at doing a summarization like this, so cut me some slack here. It's not something I've tried to do before. Chapter 1. Give me something sweet to bite. Despite being polar opposites, Octavia and Vinyl have a comfortable friendship, getting along quite well despite their differences. So well that, when financial complications appear, they readily opt to move in together. Things mostly remain calm at home, except for Vinyl's apparent love of invading Octavia's personal space, which usually succeeds in getting Octi quite flustered. Not necessarily in a bad way. Despite this, Octavia sees it as nothing more than Vinyl just pestering her, and certainly never considers it as anything serious, even ignoring how clearly she reacts to it. Octavia can't even read a book in peace, as Vinyl pauses in her decorating for the upcoming Nightmare Night to tease her a bit while trying to find out what she's reading. A book about vampires. How silly. It isn't until dinner that the problems start. Vinyl clearly isn't thrilled about Octavia's choice of pasta for dinner. But it isn't the pasta she doesn't like. Apparently, it's the garlic. After Octavia puts her hoof down, Vinyl begrudgingly takes a bite, sending her straight to the bathroom, only to come back looking even paler than usual. Is Octavia's imagination getting the better of her? Or does that seem like something from her book? Or maybe it's the way Vinyl never goes out during the day, unless she's wearing enough to protect her from the sun. Vinyl calls it sensitive skin, but Octavia can't help but question it. But later that night, when Octavia cuts herself while cooking dinner, and Vinyl's reaction is to stop the bleeding with her mouth, Octavia can't maintain her doubt much longer. Is her roommate a vampire? Ah, you see what I did there? Alright. Chapter 2. Thicker Than Water. Her ridiculous vampire thoughts kept bothering her, but Octavia is having a difficult time keeping it off her mind. So much so that during the quiet of one morning at home, she actually works herself up to asking Vinyl if she believes in vampires. The question earns her a smirk, and an answer of yes. The Camelot Concert Hall is a lovely building and a fantastic place to hear some classical music, but she really shouldn't have brought Vinyl along. It doesn't take much of Vinyl's soda slurping or the snoring as loud as a motorboat to get the attention of every pony, including the orchestra. To think, a refined pony like Octavia being kicked out of the concert hall. She doesn't take it well. She was, in fact, halfway through the process of strangling Vinyl before her energy gives out, and she instead opts to find some nice alcohol. Even as they walk to Octavia's preferred out-of-the-way bar, Vinyl continues to apologize, even going so far as to stop using Octavia's nickname. But it seems Octavia was determined to remain angry. It seems nothing will break her mood until they arrive, at which point Vinyl orders a Bloody Mary, with extra blood. As innocent a drink as it might sound, it is enough to get Octavia's imagination to a full sprint. It isn't until she's mentally scolded herself, and downs her entire drink, that she clears the thoughts away. And after seeing Vinyl with her Bloody Mary mustache, even her anger's fading. But as they go to leave at nearly 1 in the morning, Vinyl heads off in the opposite direction, citing an errand she needs to run. It wasn't that Octavia didn't trust her. Well, okay, maybe that is it. Doing her best to remain stealthy, Octavia tails her all the way to Kennerlot Hospital. She knows she can't get any closer, so she contents herself with returning to the apartment. The next morning, she takes the opportunity to ask Vinyl about her little errand. I just had to pick up a few cables and cords and stuff. For my set. DJing and stuff. Octavia accepts the answer quietly, but takes her first chance to run out to the hospital, where the reception desk is able to confirm that Vinyl had been there. She had an appointment with the hematology department. There's certainly no way Octavia can keep her imagination in check now. Chapter 3. Blood from a Stone. It seems that even a quiet game of cards at home can't stay quiet when Vinyl is involved. After flipping the table, following her loss at Go Fish, Vinyl is quick to answer the knock at the door, where she surprises Octavia with some of her friends from Ponyville. Lyra and her mare friend Bonbon, Carrot Top, and Derpy. Vinyl invited them over for poker night, without having informed Octavia. It isn't much later that Derpy's surprise royal flush provoked the day's second flipped table. Later that night, Octavia quietly creeps out from her bedroom, making certain to avoid the squeaky floorboard as she arrives at the door to Vinyl's room. After confirming the sound of snoring, she slowly enters. A few less than graceful encounters with the mess in Vinyl's room later, she arrives at the side of the bed. There lies Vinyl, shades still on her face. Finally the chance to see what she really looks like. Or to find out that she wears a sleep mask under her glasses. I'm sure Octavia would have taken the chance to roll her eyes if not for the fact that at that very moment Vinyl reached out to her, pulling her in for a snuggle as she slept. It was during that moment of nearly being strangled by Vinyl's death grip that Octavia finally comes to terms with the fact that she, despite the situation, can't deny the rush of feelings being so close to Vinyl, and finally accepts that she is attracted to the crazy mare. It's that revelation that leads Octavia to consider the full ramifications of a relationship with Vinyl, how it would affect her life, her career, her family. Even the next day at her rehearsals, the thought keeps distracting her, enough that rehearsal ends early. She's never been in a relationship before, but she knows for certain that with certainty how she feels about Vinyl. Will she really risk destroying her image and career for those feelings? Unfortunately, all of this inner turmoil is put on hold when she returns home. While rummaging for a drink in the fridge, she finds something she hadn't expected. A blood bag. Her mind races as her suspicions seem to be confirmed. It's time to start investing in silver, and garlic, and holy water. She certainly can't confront Vinyl if she is a real vampire. But those plans go out the window when she hears the door open. She throws the bag back into the fridge and does her best to put on an innocent face as Vinyl walks in, carrying the mail. Mail for Octavia. But she never gets mail. Who could it be from? Oh, just her mother. Chapter 4. The Truth Will Set You Free. It certainly must be bad news to Octavia. Alright, let me start that again. Gee, I wrote this and I can't even read it. Oh. Sleep deprivation. It's a bad thing. Alright. I apologize. It certainly must be bad news to have Octavia breathing with a paper bag on the verge of hyperventilating. Bad news such as her mother and father inviting both she and Vinyl to dinner to get to know their daughter's new roommate. Octavia realizes that before she can deal with the issue of her family and her feelings, there's something else she needs to be taken care of. One burning question that can't be left alone anymore. Octavia makes her way over to the cabinet of the kitchen, smashing a small bit of garlic over her hoof. Casually, she starts in on her questions, asking Vinyl about her errand, and just as casually stating she knows Vinyl is lying. Before Vinyl can even finish her excuse, Octavia snaps, telling Vinyl she knows full well she went to the hematology branch of the hospital. Seeming defeated, Vinyl offers to tell the truth, that she was getting a blood test done because she is an albino. That's also why she can't go out in the sun. Feeling dumbfounded, Octavia asks about her aversion to garlic. "I just really hate garlic," was the response, but Octavia isn't having it. Reaching out with the hoof covered in garlic, Vinyl visibly pulls back, but Octavia still touches her face, mocking casual contact as she watches Vinyl wince in pain. But Vinyl refuses to drop her excuses, forcing Octavia to use her last tactic. Without warning, Octavia kicks open the fridge, letting a few of the blood packs fall to the floor, waiting for Vinyl's response. Pomegranate juice. Made up to look like blood packs for Nightmare Night. Octavia almost seems ready to let it go, until another thought strikes her. Why don't they drink one of them? What little color Vinyl has in her face noticeably drains as Octavia rips the pack from her hooves and takes a drink. It clearly isn't juice. Octavia panics, throwing the pack and running to the sink as she gags on the blood, spitting it back out. All the excitement, and the blood going everywhere, is just too much for Vinyl to handle. Octavia only notices once it's too late as Vinyl turns to face her, razor-sharp fangs hanging from her jaw as she approaches Octavia. Octavia swings wildly, only managing to shatter her shades, allowing her to see the crimson-red eyes underneath. Octavia ran to her room and slammed the door, knocking over her vanity in the process, the mirror shattering and cutting her hoof. She dives under the bed to hide as she hears Vinyl approaching. She can hear the twisted voice of this new Vinyl taunting her before easily throwing the door of her room off its hinges as she enters. Octavia watches from under the bed as Vinyl searches the room before disappearing. She waits, until just as she thinks she might have been safe, she's dragged from under the bed and screams one last time as she comes face to face with what used to be Vinyl. Chapter 5. No use crying over spilled blood. The crazed and bloodthirsty vampiric Vinyl has Octavia held firmly in her powerful magic. Octavia's thrown against the bed, shuffling against the headboard, trying desperately to put as much distance as she can between them. As she moves in closer, Count Vinyl takes a moment to point out that Octavia should have never gotten involved, a sentiment that Octavia no doubt shares. Octavia begins to beg for her life, realizing all the while how futile the gesture likely is. As Octavia pins her to the bed and looms over her, Octavia flashes back roughly 5 months prior to how they first met. Octavia had come to Manhattan as a failed musician after the fiasco at the Grand Galloping Gala. Wandering aimlessly, she'd ended up meeting Violet at one of her club performances, and later that night Violet saved her when a few less savory characters had tried to rough her up. Now, having no idea why, Violet was traveling from club to club trying to find the odd mare she'd met the night before. She finally did, only to be dragged onto the dance floor, taking notice of how nice it felt to spend time with Violet. Back in their apartment, Octavia isn't ready for that flashback to be her last thoughts. She looks up at Violet, seeing her last chance to save her life, and confesses her feelings. Violet seems to stop, a look of confusion crossing her features, before she resumes her attack. Out of options, Octavia can do nothing as Violet leans in and Octavia feels the pinch of her fangs puncture her neck. Octavia has the time to consider how this is significantly less romantic than her book had suggested, before she begins to feel herself passing out. As Violet pulls away for a moment, Octavia takes one last chance, leaning in and kissing Violet as deeply and passionately as she can manage. As she pulls away, the taste of her own blood on her lips, she can see Violet looking back at her, mouth hanging open. Violet slowly regains her senses in time to realize what's happening and springs to Octavia's aid as Octavia finally blacks out. Coming to, Octavia finds a bandage on her neck, and Octavia sobbing softly and Violet sobbing softly in the corner. As Octavia calls out to her, Violet turns, eyes red from crying, but now also a deep magenta. Violet is deeply mortified that she could have lost control enough to attack her closest friend. Octavia tries to comfort her despite everything, but can't get Violet calmed down until after a few well-placed smacks across the face. Octavia holds Violet and comforts her until, exhausted, she dozes off. Octavia manages to drag the two of them into bed, and she happily snuggles with Violet as they sleep. She wakes again to the smell of smoke, and prepares to leap from the bed until Violet appears, returning with her attempt at an apology breakfast. Chapter 6. A Calm Before the Storm. In all fairness, Octavia really has every right to be angry about what happened, but despite that, she can't seem to get past how incredible it is. She eagerly watches as Violet demonstrates how her fangs extend and retract and how her eye color shifts. She's also rather enjoying how much easier it is to talk to Violet when she can actually see her eyes. They laugh and joke about Violet's abilities over the replacement breakfast Octavia made as Octavia carefully questions Violet about some of the more sensitive subjects, like how often she's fed, or how often she has to feed, and if she's ever fed on a pony before. Octavia was, in fact, her first. She can't, however, tell Octavia how she arranges to get blood bags from the hospital. That information is apparently still a secret. As their conversation dies down, Violet takes the opportunity to raise her own question, about what Octavia had said last night about her feelings for Violet. Octavia doesn't hide it any longer, admitting that she meant it, although she is still hesitant. She knows the traditional Canterlot nobility wouldn't approve, and neither would her family, but she agrees once Violet asks her to be her special sun pony. After all that had happened, the two agree to take the day off together, relaxing at home as Octavia still tries to work out how to prepare Violet for the dinner with her parents. She certainly isn't ready for anyone to find out about their relationship, and neither of them is ready for anyone to find out about the truth about Violet. Chapter 7. First Impressions. As the two lay cuddled together, Octavia lets her thoughts wander to her feelings for Violet. Everything seems so simple as they lay there together. As Violet stirs, clearly dreaming, Octavia watches, curious as to what she's dreaming about. At first, Octavia hears her name, then sees Violet begin to lick at her lips before struggling against herself as tears begin to flow. She was dreaming about that night, and it got Octavia thinking about it as well. She suddenly realizes that she's completely looked past the fact that she nearly died. She rushed into her feelings for Violet even after nearly losing her life. She starts to question again, knowing she's inexperienced with romance and worrying she's not making the right decisions. But she doesn't have too long to brood and question herself. Today's an important day. Despite the looming dinner, the two manage to keep their moods light, laughing and joking as they head into town to pick up some appropriate dinnerware. After a brief time spent appreciating how their significant other looks in a flowing dress, they stop off at a local cafe where a clearly nervous Octavia attempts to cover some basic table manners with Violet, something that's definitely a losing battle. The night comes all too quickly, and after a rather steamy shower session, they dress and head out to the restaurant, the same one Violet had gotten them kicked out of quite recently. As they approach the reserved table, Violet can't help but notice how much Octavia looks like her parents, except for the fact that they're both... And suddenly they arrive at the table, and receive the bored and dismissive greeting expected from Canterlot nobles. Violet succeeds in making a good first impression, even using proper language as they take their seats. Chapter 8. A Dinner and a Show. As I was saying, though, Vinyl did happen to notice that the one difference between Octavia and her parents. They're both unicorns. There's hardly time to consider it, though, as the strained relationship between parent and daughter already begins to show. Her mother already seems to be familiar with Vinyl for her profession, and is definitely a bit put off as she asks how they met. Octavia struggles to even make it through the story as her parents continue to interrupt at every turn, even going so far as to make a snide comment at her dress. Having painfully finished her explanation, Octavia's mother turns her attention back to Vinyl, curious to know more about her. Vinyl does manage to cover a bit of her backstory without interruption, and Octavia goes on to explain her work, hoping the prestigious names of the club she hosts might impress her mother. Vinyl manages to avoid the attempts by Octavia's mother to bait her with snide comments about her style of music, and Octavia nervously moves the discussion along, explaining how they've moved in together. The disapproving look from her mother, at what it implied, were enough to increase Octavia's nervousness, leading her to toy with her collar and tie, just enough to reveal the hidden bandages on her neck. After her mother's initial panic, Octavia and Vinyl were able to assure her it was a simple accident, and certainly didn't warrant her inspection of the wound. Several long minutes of substanceless conversation later, dessert arrives. Despite her best efforts, Octavia isn't able to avoid getting a bit on her face as she tries to eat, lacking magic after all. What follows are a comment from her mother as to how much of a shame it is she wasn't born a unicorn, and how amazing it is she's come so far with such a disability. Yeah, I know. Real charmers, aren't they? And even as Octavia goes about the process of biting her tongue, her father interrupts with an ouch, having cut his hoof on the silverware, which was more than Vinyl could handle. The sight of blood as he dabbed at it with his napkin was enough to make her tense. Octavia noticed immediately and rushed them both off to the bathroom with hardly an explanation. After a few tense moments, with Octavia there to comfort her, Vinyl's able to get herself under control, though the close call clearly has her shaken. Octavia does her best to reassure her, doing so with a soft kiss. Though the kiss is a bit unusual in that Vinyl is staring intently past Octavia at something else. That something else turned out to be Octavia's mother, who had come in time to see the kiss and proceeds to scream. Thinking quickly, or at least reacting quickly, Vinyl rushes up and knocks Octavia's mother out cold with a firm hoof to the head. Octavia clearly doesn't take that very well. And thus ends Chapter 8, and this particular recording. I'll be finishing up the remaining chapters in the next few videos, and hopefully I'll have a bit more time and I can actually clean up the audio a bit and get rid of some of this ridiculous stumbling that I've managed to do tonight. I hope it's not too terrible. I hope you guys like the format and the style I'm using for this, and I hope that for 3mu3, this is kind of along the lines what you hope for. Anyway, I will see you guys next time, so thank you for listening.